Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Zeitguys, a podcast focused on the creation and analysis of culture. We hope to discuss a variety of fields such as literature, film, music, and so on, and especially look forward to speaking with and promoting new and independent creatives in their respective fields. I am Alighieri as usual, and I am again joined by my co host, Gallo.
Hey, how you
Gallo.
doing?
And today we are discussing the 2014 Italian comedy I Can Quit Whenever I Want, or Smetto, quando voglio. It is directed by Sidney Sibilia and produced by Domenico Procacci and Matteo Rovere. Now, it was a very successful film in Italy when it initially came out, and it got two sequels, which were produced by Groenlandia, a production company co-founded by Sibilia and Rovere, who are friends and frequent collaborators. And in terms of feature-length films, I believe it's Sibilia's first, his directorial debut with a feature film. He'd done a few short films before that, and he hasn't done a ton of films yet, but he did the two sequels to I Can Quit Whenever I Want. But aside from that trilogy, he only has two other films, Rose Island and Mixed by Airy, which both of those were also collaborations with Rovere, who is a noticeably more active. He won the Nastro d'Argento Prize for his role as producer on I Can Quit Whenever I Want, and is the youngest Italian filmmaker to have ever won it. And as I said, as a producer, he's worked with Sibilia on all of his other feature length films, but has a more expansive filmography. Some items that are of note are The First King, Il Primo Re, which is a retelling of the story of Romulus and Remus, and I would say is definitely one of my personal favorite films. I know you also really enjoyed it, Gallo.
Oh, I
Yeah,
adored it. It was
yeah.
fantastic.
Maybe we'll discuss that one next month to celebrate the anniversary of the founding of Rome. But for now, that's all I'll say about that one. Rovere is also the showrunner, director, and producer of the TV drama Romulus, which adapts the same legend of Rome's founding king, but in a different way than the film. And another interesting film he worked on as a producer was The Bad Poet, or in Italian, Il Cattivo Poeta, which is a rather somber film about the last days of the Italian and poet and adventurer Gabriele D'Annunzio. And so these the collaboration between these two on this film is it gives a good idea of how talented both of them are as filmmakers. And so perhaps we should get into the film itself now, unless you have anything you'd like to say, Gallo.
No, I think we should actually get into just a brief overview of the actual film. Yeah,
Right. So,
um,
yeah, go ahead.
right. The film itself, to put it in the briefest synopsis possible, is basically Italian Breaking Bad if it was a comedy. The
Yes.
film is Yeah, the film is ultimately about a sensitive young man and his merry band of sensitive young men, all with great credentials, education, and potential, being forced to do crime in order to make any sort of money at all in any meaningful way. The movie starts out with our main character, Pietro Cini, a professor at the
Well,
university.
before we do that, we should get to the flash forward where the film starts, because the premise is in Italy. There's obviously illegal drugs, yes, but the way that it's legally categorized is certain molecules are only illegal if they're on a proscribed list from the Ministry of Health. So if you have a drug that does the same effect, but it's not on that prescribed list, it's technically legal. And so our protagonist, Pietro Zini, is a he graduated at age 24 with a degree in biology with top marks and a master's in computational neuroscience and molecular dynamics. And so obviously he's very smart, and due to unfortunate life circumstances, he and a bunch of his other educated friends get together and make technically legal drugs to get rich and actually make a living after getting screwed over by the economy. So if you want to pick up Gallo where you were.
Yeah, that's more or less a brief, good synopsis. As you mentioned, the flash forward actually happens at the start of the film, where it shows an event that happens later on, where Dim and the gang are, for reasons that become obvious towards the end of the film, robbing a pharmacy with one of them outside smoking a cigarette, clearly on watch, and we get a brief flash of some of a gun going on the side, and it's shot in such a way to make it seem as if it's a very serious and planned action, like it's a serious crime thing, which it definitely is not. It's clearly a fuck up later on in the film. That's very
Uh,
hilarious. It's a very hilarious subversion. We then go back to where I was beginning, where at the start of the film, the main character Pietro Zini is actually making a presentation of his breakthrough research to the commission at the university to keep funding himself and his research for next year, and he is promptly sabotaged by his partner and implied mentor, Professor Seta, who has the most obnoxious ringtone in the world, talks loudly on the phone while he's trying to talk to the important commission, and reaches down at a site and pulls a plug, destroying the projector. Now, as he goes on to further sabotage Sini for reasons we cannot determine. Just he clearly is just an asshole, apparently. And Zini is going home to his wife or girlfriend. It wasn't clear which she was. How they're desperate for money
well,
because they got
well,
an
maybe we should
elevator bill and all this.
take a step back there because it's there's a good setup there with the joke with Professor Seta, I think, is he's acting like he's on Pietro's side and all this, and then he accidentally unplugs the slot projector slide, like you were saying. But then afterwards, they're out there talking, and he's like, I know how I can get you funding because I've got this political patron who I can get you set up with, and it'll all be good. He'll be on your side, and then that'll get the uh, finance commission to give you the funding you need instead of Giacometti because that there's that political element in the way funding is, and then
Basically, think of how political things are in American universities for funding if you had the wrong politics. But in Italy, it's the same, but there's actually more fracture along the power players within any given funding commission rather
yes.
than all being uniform in America.
So, anyways, we see Pietro go back to his apartment, and when he gets there, there's a bunch of bratty college kids just there on their phones, and one of them smoking a joint, and they're allegedly supposed to be there for tutoring from him. And we find out that they all owe him they all owe him 500 euros each, but none of them have paid him a single cent yet.
And one of them is freeloading on his bed.
Yeah, one of them is just straight up sleeping on his bed and mooches off of him and his girlfriend for dinner. He eats with them there. I mean, it is a pretty common hospitality thing in Italy to, if you have a guest over, have them eat dinner with you. But it's clearly Maurizio, the name of that specific student, mooching off of them.
Yeah,
Because,
and
well, he's his girlfriend is kind of Pietro's girlfriend is kind of complaining about it, and then Pietro's like, "Oh no, Maurizio, he's a poor guy. He lost his parents in a plane crash, and he has to work, all the time to pay his own tuition." And then that's another setup for a punchline we'll get to soon enough. But go ahead.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, keep that in mind. Now after this, Pietro actually goes and this is the point where he goes to meet the two linguist scholars at the gas station to talk to him about how shitty life is
Yes.
after
Well,
the
no,
gas
no,
bill.
no. Actually, that's after he finds out about the cutbacks. So the next day, he goes back to the university and he finds out from Professor Seitza that the commission because of cutbacks, they only backed his rival's research, Giacometti. And the Professor Seta admits that part of the reason is because Pietro's research was just too complicated for him or the commission to understand, and they didn't like to be made to feel stupid. And then he also adds
Which
that a another problem is that political patron that Professor Seta set Pietro up with, who Pietro never even spoke to. Well, that's politically problematic, so that's also part of the reason they decided not to fund him. But
the
yes, you
worst
had
part
something to
is
say.
Professor Set says it as if it was Pietro's own idea, not Set who fucked him over.
Yeah,
Uh, what was it there? I was going to say something about the commission, but never mind. Moving on. So he gets screwed over. He only gets one concession. And it goes to his academic rival instead of him. So he's screwed over. He has no money. More or less kicked out of the university at this stage because he doesn't have tenure. He doesn't have funding. He can't really stay there without it. So he goes back to his wife and basically lies to her about how great everything
yeah.
is, and he's
He
realizing
he
he was crying like
well he
oh,
tries to hide the fact that he was crying, but and then in the heat of the moment when his wife's asking him, or sorry, girlfriend is asking him what's wrong, yada yada yada, he, in the heat of the moment is like, I can't tell her I got, fired because we have all these financial troubles and stuff. So he lies and says he got a full-time contract with the university, full-time research contract. And then after
and
this
that was
is the
what,
gas
and that's
station. Yeah.
and that's why he was crying tears of joy and happiness.
Yeah.
But yes, after that, he does go to his former friends, the Latin scholars, who are working for a Singhalese man, Mr. Khan,
Yeah.
at the gas
Now,
station he owns as
their names
attendants.
are Giorgio and Mattia. They're the two. They initially just seem like two normal gas station attendants, but then when they start talking with Pietro, we find out quickly they're very educated. They start talking about Hilarion paradoxes and speaking to each other in literal Latin. They're both
And,
internationally acclaimed Latin scholars. Yeah.
and Pietro was actually surprised one of them even speaks Singhalese, and he did. And I think it was Matthew who did this. Is like, well, when you know how to know how to read Sanskrit, it all sort of falls into place. Which is, I don't know anything about Sanskrit or descendant languages there, but I don't think that's how it works.
Well, anyways, the and this is a kind of a theme we've got going on there as they're talking. Pietro is kind of giving them, crap for working there and saying he doesn't want to end up like them. And they're like, nah, Mr. Khan is a great guy. He's so nice to us. And then he immediately comes out and starts shouting at them about slacking off and, verbally abusing them. And we notice that this is a theme throughout the film is we've got all these super well educated, people who are masters in their field, and then they get screwed over and end up working a on well dead end job, to put it frankly, and get treated like crap by their overbearing bosses. And we
I have
also
a
find
lot.
out, yeah,
Go
we
ahead.
also find out
I have a
later that Mr. Khan is literally having Giorgio and Mattia sleep in one of the warehouses for the gas station, which I guess is
which to be
free
fair,
housing, but it's still a bit
yeah,
dehumanizing.
yeah, I know. Yeah, it's not great, but at the end of the day, it's free housing. So, would you complain if you're down on your luck? I'm not. I don't know. It's not great, but yeah, free housing. Anyway, I have a lot to say about the economic situation in Italy around 2014, post 2008, but I'll say that after the summary of the film.
Right. So as they're at the gas station, one of the people who comes through the gas station pays 205 euros for gas. And then Pietro recognizes that it's Maurizio, the broke student whose parents are dead, right? So,
And he's driving a massive truck.
yes. So, um, Pietro gets on a bicycle and chases down the truck, and at a stoplight or a stop sign, he confronts Maurizio and asks him why he's driving a spaceship because he's making a comment about how much gas it chugs, and why he hasn't paid him for his tuition for the tutoring yet, because he just saw him pay 205 euros for gas. And Maurizio claims, oh, it's, I don't got the money right now. And then he talks about his father's catering company, and Pietro gets upset at that too, and is like, I thought your parents were dead." And Maurizio is like, "Oh no, no. What I said is, we had a fight, and I said you were dead to me." And he's just trying to weasel his way out of it before he speeds off again, and Pietro has to continue chasing him.
Basically, like, a running theme, at least with Pietro and the students, is the suffering millennial teacher dealing with yuppie Zoomers.
Anyways, so he chases Maurizio all the way to a club, and Maurizio eventually gets him to agree to only pay half for now, half of the tutoring fee, so only 250 euros
250.
instead of the full
Yeah.
500. And then he gives him a spiked cocktail, which Pietro drinks,
A
and he
sip of his cocktail, yeah.
yeah. So Pietro drinks it, he blacks out, and then he wakes up in one of the club's toilets next to a toilet which a guy is pissing in. Very pleasant experience to wake up to.
You're forgetting the best part. He had a dick drawn on his forehead in silver
Right.
marker.
Well, on his temple, but yeah.
Yeah, and he goes out and finds Maurizio again in the nightclub there, and while he was demanding an explanation, he goes off on a rant at how the actual drug itself was synthetic trash. Like he couldn't contain his professional autism enough to not criticize the drug and its effects.
Yeah. And then he hears from Maurizio that the two pills cost 50 euros each. And he's like, that's rubbish. They couldn't have cost more than 2 euros each to make. And then he has an epiphany. Oh, wait, you're telling me if I make, people can make trash like that for 2 euros and sell it for a insane markup. Maybe I should start being a drug dealer. So he has this little montage where he goes and does research on drug legality in Italy, selling drugs, smart drugs, and so on. And then he goes to meet his friend Alberto, who's a chemist, and
A rather large and in charge gentleman.
yeah, he's very fat. Which finally we see a picture from when he was still working at the university with Pietro, and he was much thinner and in better shape. But after he got kicked out, for I don't believe the reason is ever given, but he got kicked out of the universe.
It actually was heavily implied. He also signed something the professor said, and it implied he got screwed over and lost
Right.
his thing. Yeah.
Okay. So, anyways, Alberto, down on his luck, gained like 100 pounds at least. But, anyways, Alberto is working at a Chinese restaurant. And again, he has his boss who shouts at him and, verbally abuses him while he's working as a dishwasher, even though he's this genius chemist. And Pietro basically wants him to help him create the drug to they want to use the algorithm, which is Pietro's big research project, to create a new psychotropic that isn't on the Ministry of Health's prescribed list. And then,
Nootropic rather than psychotropic, because those are two different categories of drugs with
right,
very different
yes,
effects.
right, okay, yes. And then, so Alberto's a bit hesitant about it, and Pietro is trying to sell him on it, and is like, "All right, yes, the two of there are problems if it's just the two of us, which is why we need more people for our drug dealing gang." And then
So this is where the
where
heist
we
team
introduce the
get together with the
crew.
Choco Folks.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the first guy we meet is a man who he's got a shaved head. He's dressed like a punk. He's acting tough. He's at a job interview for, I believe it's like a salvage yard or something like that.
Looks like a savage yard. Yeah.
And he's
He looks like
going on about how he's some hardened criminal who did 2 years in prison, and how his uncle got stabbed because of like a deal gone bad over online poker, and he uses because he's trying to, appear more on edge, more working class, and then he uses the term bitter legal quarrel, and that reveals to the guy he's interviewing that he's actually, educated, and according to the guy, the interviewer, too educated for the job because he doesn't take university graduates for whatever reason. And we find out that
I
this. Yeah, go ahead.
it's not clear if it's an Italian prejudice thing by the working class or it's just for the sake of the movie.
Well, I mean, you know how it is everywhere. Is sometimes they won't take university graduates because it's like, oh, you're overqualified. The overqualified thing is, I'm sure, something anyone who's had to look for a job in the past few years has heard, especially if you have a college
Yeah,
degree.
there's multiple reasons for that. Like one of the main reasons, is ostensibly and most understandable, is no one wants to hire someone who has the potential to get a better job and leave in a month or so, which is never going to be the case in the current economy.
No.
But the real and infuriating reason why is that no one in management wants to hire anyone who could potentially replace them.
Yeah. Anyways, we find out that Mr. Fake Tough Guy here is Andrea DeSantis, an anthropologist who was a big shot at La Sapienza, which is one of Italy's most prestigious universities. And he, it turns out, nah, he's not a hard guy. He is just another academic. And so the guy he's interviewing tells him to get more life experience, quote, get into trouble, live on the street, and then maybe come back, which, it's a job at a salvage yard. It's not. Um, I don't
However,
think
that's a great setup for the ending.
it is a great setup for the ending. This does come back, but it does kind of tap into that usual advice you're given. Not the pull yourself up by your bootstraps straps variety, but it is similar to that, where it's, oh yeah, just get some life experience, and sir, this is a McDonald's. I don't think I need to, you know, figure out urban survival to work here on the fucking fryer or the oven
As
or
you
to wash
are all listening
dishes.
to this and you're feeling a lot of sympathy for these characters and their situation, just know that this was the case 10 years ago in Italy and it's still the case now, just as it is in America, in the UK, in Ireland, in France, in Japan, even, although Japan has better work security. It's horrendous. And to like Andrea himself, even though his field is anthropology, is also a genius because his thesis was so successful that it was translated over 50 languages, and he still can't get any research grants despite clearly being a hotshot in his field.
Yeah, and then we move on to Arturo Frontini, an archaeologist who is almost always called in to supervise whenever they find something from ancient Rome. Which, if you're familiar at all with the process of like construction or renovation in the actual city of Rome, they it's very common for them to find ancient Roman ruins, and so they got to call in the archaeologists to supervise the construction and all that. Anyways,
And
going back to
despite
Arturo,
how yeah, sorry,
he's a classics
go on, sorry.
archaeology graduate specialized in archaeological mapping. And, he knows ancient Rome better than anyone, according to Pietro. So why do they need him? What does the archaeologist contribute to their gang of pushers? Well, he has access to a van. That's it. He has
No one
access
else.
to a
Actually,
van from the
I don't think
archaeology
anyone else
department.
is shown to own a car or
No,
vehicle of any kind other than a
yeah,
bicycle.
no one else does. So he has a van from the archaeology department, where he works part time. Yeah, what this is what the film says in summary about him. He's poor, 11 years of short-term contracts, lives with his parents, and has to have excavation workers give him food for lunch. So,
Yeah, he has like
yeah.
a pair of excavation workers he works with who are like, in contrast, the other blue collar working guy actually kind and like the guy and take pity on him.
Yeah. And then
Uh,
go ahead.
go on.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
And it just knows about it, like out of all the ones we're dealing with here in the crew, other than Giorgio and Matty, the Latin scholars, Uh, Andrea DeSantis clearly has the most steady work with 11 years of short-term
Well, that's
contracts because of the
Arturo. No,
constant.
that's Arturo. Andrea is the anthropologist.
Oh yeah, Arturo, 11 years of short-term contracts, constantly finding Roman ruins all around Rome, and he could still barely just get by.
Yeah,
And he's actually doing the thing he's supposed to be doing. So even if you actually get in your field, you're basically struggling worse than a blue-collar worker.
yeah. And then naturally, since this whole thing is to make money, they need a guy who's good with finance and business. And their initial idea is their old friend Martinetti, who's an expert in management economics. Unfortunately, Alberto tells Pietro he's away in Norway. And then Pietro is like, oh, so he finally got that teaching post in Norway. And it turns out, no, he's working on the fishing boats for 6 months. So even he,
It's
the
bleak.
economist, is just doing, mundane work that's not got nothing to do with his degree. So instead, they go
So
up
even
with their. Yes, go ahead.
so even if you have a business degree, the basic degree you need to start a business or get into any kind of office job, you would think in America. This guy did that and did over and above that and is stuck working on a fishing boat in Norway. It's bleak, man.
Yes. So since they can't get Martinetti, they go with Bonelli, Bartolomeo Bonelli, who is an expert in dynamic microeconomics. And the scene cuts to Bonelli, who is trying to count cards in a poker game with a bunch of gypsy gangsters. And he nearly gets his ass beat when he, notices that they cheated and is like, oh, it seems pretty strange that you got, what was it, three of a kind, I think.
Yeah, tree of a kind. When he already counted the
Yeah,
cards,
when he
he
already
knows that
counted
shouldn't
the
have been
cards.
possible.
Yeah. And so they try to beat the crap out of him. And as he's running away, they even shoot at him. And so
Yeah.
he climbs onto one of the trailers in the gypsy camp and leaps off the roof and just crashes into the trash where the Pietro and Arturo are with the van. And they decide to pick him up and recruit him from there to join their gang.
You missed the part where he passed by his gypsy girlfriend, who was the daughter of the guy trying to kill him.
Right, yes. And that also comes back later. This film is very good with setting up a lot of jokes early on where the punchline happens much later in the film.
It's very well written, yeah.
Yeah. Now now that we've got the whole crew assembled, they meet in one of the gas station warehouses, the one where Giorgio and Mattia live. And there's a quote from Pietro when he's trying to sell them all the idea. He says, "You're the greatest minds around, and you're living on the fringes of society. The only thing we know how to do is study, and they won't let us." Talking about how they all are like cutting edge experts in their field, as we find out in the film repeatedly with all these characters. But they none of them
Yeah,
can get better. Like Arturo probably is the one who's the best off, and he's still living with his parents.
which is extremely sad. Yeah, because we got top tier scientists, chemists, researchers who should be pushing the edges of science. We got a brilliant management economics guy who should be running or advising like CFO or CFO's position in a major corporation. We got this classic archaeologist who should be doing major dig sites. And we got the Latin scholars who should be helping him translate shit or just like translating all these hundreds of thousands of untranslated texts of missing history all throughout the world and not being put to use. All these people are like extremely educated, extremely talented, could be helping society, but society does not value their skills at all
Yeah, and now
because
that
those skills require patronage.
Yeah, and now that we have everyone here and got the scene where they're all talking, it's probably a good time to bring up this film has a ton of inside jokes related to each of the characters, like specialized fields. Like you got plenty of jokes from Bartolomeo about Austrian economics and so on, and then Arturo with Etruscan. No, no, no. Sorry, the Etruscan joke is Mattia or Giorgio, that happens later on, and then there's a bunch of pretty much constant in jokes that'll fly over your head if you're not familiar with their given field. But it's just a very cleverly written series of jokes. It's there's almost always one going on in the background, even if it's not the focus of the scene. There'll be one guy, one of the main guys, making a comment in the background or talking to someone in the background
Yeah.
about that. Yeah,
Now, going on from there, once he actually convinces the crew, uh, he actually manages to does that happen before the scene or after the scene where he's in the Chinese restaurant after hours and he sits Alberto down and actually he actually reads through his research there, and Alberto was taking issue about how cheap his plan for making the
yeah,
drug was because it wasn't up to his standards. He was too stuffy to like sell out an
yeah.
underquality
It
product,
was like they needed a higher purity for the drug, and I think they got to what was it 99% purity,
which is insane.
yeah, something insane like that. But anyways, now that they've got everyone, they have to buy a bunch of stuff to make the drugs, like uh, fish feed. I think was one of the things, and a bunch of other
Yeah, a lot of
ingredients.
fish feed. Like, if you ever see a movie, as Breaking Bad especially shows this, how it's a bad idea to just go to stores and buy a shitload of certain items there, which the government and law enforcement know can be used to make drugs. So to see someone buy large amounts of them, they're immediately alerted to that by the store. So I don't know how they got away with this so early on in the film, where they're literally buying all these massive amounts of things that clearly have
Well, part
materials,
of
but
it
I guess they
is
weren't.
that they broke it between them. So, like, I think it was Matsuya had to get the fish feed, and then Arturo went and got the stuff from the pharmacy. The yeah,
Yeah. Oh, before that, we forgot the scene where fucking what was it, Arturo? Yeah, no, it was Bonilli who was trying to explain the market economics to the guys of how much they needed capital, startup capital, and no one had any money. So he
yeah.
goes to his girlfriend, who's like, "But marry me." Is like, no, no, and you just want me for my money. No, 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 not at all. And she's trying to get him to commit to marrying him, and he talks his way around it, then talks her to get him 10,000 fucking euros from her father,
Well,
so he can have money for the drugs.
yeah. Going back to the financing scene where Bartolomeo is talking about that, comes up with his financial plan and all that, and it's like, okay, so we need our startup capital. And everyone just has this super depressed look on their face. And as he's going through the options, like remortgaging, loans, personal savings, loan from family members, you can just hear him get more and more dismayed as he sees that, oh my gosh, no one has any capital. Uh,
No, so it's all up to him.
yep. Anyways, they get everything they need. But now, how are they going to actually make the drug? So they have to break into the university lab on Friday nights to make the drug. And
This is
there's a nice
hilarious.
bit of physical
Good.
comedy here because, Pietro and Alberto are the two actual scientists here. And since Alberto is like comically obese, he has to, you know, get over the fence to sneak into the university. And there's a nice bit of comedy there because it's something that requires a fair bit of dexterity and athleticism. And I'm sure you can imagine the comedy there with a super fat guy trying to do that.
Fortunately, it doesn't linger on the scene too long, because I
Yeah,
can definitely imagine an American movie lingering in that for a good fucking 15 minutes.
yeah, yeah. That's
But
another thing about the film is the jokes don't overstay their welcome. It's
no, they don't.
very it lasts for as long as it needs to. Most of the time, the gags are very quick and done. They don't talk them to death or do them to death. It's very
So,
very good that
so
way.
all the jokes feel fast paced and punchy.
Yeah, it's very
Now,
Italian way of doing it. Humor.
yeah. So to get into their old chemist lab, and the Alberto has a brief moment of nostalgia, seeing how much he missed this place, and even though it's a kind of funny situation, It is kind of sad because these are two genius professors, and one of them was reduced to a literal dishwater water in some back alley Chinese restaurant, and the other one just lost his job recently. And they spend the night basically making the first tablet of their drug.
Yeah. And so they go to one of the clubs and start experimenting there with distribution and so on. And they, people are like, "Oh my god, this is like the best drug because it gets them really high and so on." And there's another running gag here where Alberto really wants more like detailed feedback data, so he tries to constantly goes up to the people who are high on the drug and tries to ask them for like detailed feedback on the drugs.
Yeah. It's also the scene where we see the other skills of some of the crew come into effect. Like Arturo, no, Benelli is in the men's room there, telling them which stall to go to get the drugs. We have who was the guy in the stall? Was that Andrea? I
I
think it was
think it was
Andrea.
Giorgio.
Oh, Giorgio. And Andrea was the anthropologist was actually out on the floor, giving people the directions where to go for the drugs. Because being an anthropologist, he's actually reasonably good at figuring people out,
Yeah.
which is good in the social situation.
S-
Because some members of this gang are better at dealing with street and situations than others, and that becomes really obvious later on in the film.
yeah. Like this is backtracking a bit, but there's a scene where it's Mattia, he's at the gas station and he's, talking with some customer who, what's the expression? Uh, it was something like
You could
to,
check the
yeah,
tires.
check
Yeah,
the tires. And um, if you don't speak another language, you might not get this, but there's a lot of loan words and phrases from English and other languages. And so in Italian,
yeah.
whatever it was an English phrase. And so Mattia, who is just, he puts on the up the face of being happy with his gas station job, but he's clearly like on short patience because he talks about how he finds it interesting how Anglo-Saxon, which is to say English, contaminates the vocabulary and how it happens and almost always happens in barely literate environments. And then the guy,
AKA
yeah,
people who mostly watch TV and movies.
and then the guy gets out of the car and just decks him. uh, and
Yeah, that's great.
yeah. And so going back to the montage, we see they expand how they're doing the distribution and they begin living it up. They're getting more money. Like Pietro starts wearing a silk jacket. And then we get to a scene where Pietro is eating probably breakfast with his GF, and we found out from an offhand comment earlier, but we know she works at a drug rehab place and she starts talking about this new drug and how it's messing people up and how people who were clean are falling back into the habit because of it. And we see Pietro feel a bit guilty, which sets up a bit of tension for later in the film between him wanting to, make money and get what he feels he's owed and the negative effects of how he's going about that.
Guilty? I'm pretty sure he didn't seem guilty when he was like, "What they're saying is it's cool, or is it really cool?"
Well, there's
He's
well like when she's talking about it, you can see from the expression on his face, he does feel a little guilty about it. But yeah, there's definitely mixed feelings there. Um,
yeah,
anyways, so we see what they're doing with their money, and one nice little touch is we see that Arturo, the archaeologist, he takes the two excavation workers out to an expensive lunch, 50 euros a plate, and is treating them to that as like a thank you for them, offering him lunch when he was, still down on his luck. And then we
yeah.
see
That's
that, that Alberto, he's finally sick of people not giving him good enough feedback and it begins experimenting on himself with the drug. And
in
he
order to actually
gets,
get any feedback on how the drug actually
yeah.
works.
And so he
And
gets
that
pretty
sets
wild with that. Yeah, go ahead.
Before that, we're skipping over how they've been going up in the world to different and better nightclubs, the corporate party,
Well, the corporate party comes in
the
later.
gay nightclub as well.
Yeah.
There's a funny scene where who said it actually made the joke there. Yeah, it was actually Andrea himself there in the front seat of the van saying like, we're going to an anthropologically sensitive area next, as they're all putting on this really sparkly fetish wear. And it's very obvious where to go to before they actually get there, when they actually get to the gay nightclub. And one very funny scene, Alberto, again trying to get feedback from his drug, sits down on the couch beside another gay guy and says like, "Hello, I am clearly homosexual. Could you please give me some feedback about the drug?" and funnily enough, the gay guy, who was actually quite thin and fit compared to Alberto, seems interested in Alberto, clearly making him uncomfortable.
uh,
Oh, that's great.
anyways, once the montage is done, I think it's Bartolomeo who two guys confront him and they, knock him out after he gets slippy with them. And we find out that they're Morena's men, the local drug lord whose territory they're pushing in on. And, he's not, this drug lord is obviously not happy with them undercutting him. And
No, he is not.
yes, but at the same time, Pietro gets an invitation from some big shot to be dealers at some fancy, super rich party on a Japanese rooftop garden. And we go there, and it's like, rich businessmen, politicians, and so on. Like, Pietro runs into a guy and he's talking to him. And then after this, he runs into Professor Seta, who tells him that he was just talking to a undersecretary for one of the government ministries, and asks Pietro to introduce him to the undersecretary. And Pietro, feeling a bit spiteful, justifiably spiteful though, ignores the professor and refuses to introduce him. Now that he's the
There's
one
also
on top.
There's also a funny thing there with Professor Seta highlighting how fucking shady and snaky he is, because he hands Pietro a red card with his number, and he says like, "Don't worry about the plus 535 on it. There, it's a Bolivian number, and don't worry about the fact that it's a Bolivian number."
Yeah,
Indicating that Professor Seta is into some deep shady crap.
yeah. That the whole joke with Peruvian and Bolivian phone numbers is a whole thing during that party, but yeah, we'll get watch the film yourself. Now let's see. After do we want to talk about oh yes, the Russian and what
The
sorry, what's her
Russian
name?
prostitutes.
Yes. What's her name? Paprika. So they're, living it up and they, get in over their heads, the money and all that's getting to them. And Alberto ends up with Paprika, a Russian escort, and he's like with her for the rest of the film, and she barely speaks a word of Italian and gets very angry at him and is constantly shouting in Russian. And
Because when she becomes a kept woman, she suddenly has all these high airs about her, and she doesn't want to live in an apartment that's full of girls that are loose girls, as if she wasn't exactly the same thing less than a week before.
anyways, there's a lot of funny jokes during the whole part where they're living it up and they're like getting off the wall. Like Arturo, I think, ends up getting a tattoo of some archaeological thing. I don't remember exactly what it is on like
It was never
his shoulder that goes
neck.
up his neck. Yeah,
It wasn't really clear what it was. We never got a
yeah.
good look at it.
But anyways, Pietro's girlfriend Julia gets suspicious, and she finds the hidden money, and they get into an argument, and out of frustration, Pietro admits he's a dealer, and Julia admits she's pregnant, and she kicks him out. And now he has this whole, dilemma. He's got his girlfriend with his child, who's, obviously not pleased with this whole thing of him being a drug dealer. But on the other hand, that's the only way he's making money because, you know, we see what it's like if he tried to go the conventional route. He'd end up like Mattia Giorgio at a gas station or like Alberto. washing dishes, which he wouldn't be able to afford the apartment him and Julia are living in. And so
Oh, not at all.
he's kind of in an impossible situation here.
Yeah, with a kid in the way, what else can he effectively do?
Yeah. Now,
Although even the revelation of the child is also set up for another joke later on.
yeah. Now, well, there's a whole couple scenes where he's trying to make up with his wife and event. I mean, sorry, girlfriend Julia, and he arranges for a private dinner at a fancy restaurant. He reserves the whole place. And as he's waiting for her, he's confronted by Morena, who tells him that, I'm your new boss, and you have 2 days to bring me 10 kilos of your fancy new drug. And he tries to intimidate him. And Pietro is initially, defiant because he's overconfident from his recent success. And then Morena kidnaps Julia and puts her on the phone. And she says, if he asks you for a ransom, don't pay because I'm going to kill you the second, he lets me out.
Italian women, am I right?
Anyways, after this, Pietro's luck gets even worse. Alberto gets in a car crash. He was going, what was it, 240 kilometers down like
Yeah,
a side
240
lane?
kilometers an hour, high as a kite.
Yeah, he crashes. It's a miracle he didn't die. Anyways, the police find
The
half a
worst part was the found stuff in the
yeah,
car itself.
yeah. The police find a half a kilo of drugs in the car, and then so they're in a bad situation. The police are probably going to find them out because of this, and yeah, well, the substance technically isn't illegal yet. It's a bit of a dodgy area. And so, they got to do this last deal. They got to give Moreno the 10 kilos. So Pietro goes to everybody and lies and is like, "All right, we're gonna do one last deal. Get out of this. Screw Alberto. He's already screwed himself over. If we do this, we're gonna get paid. What was it, 1 million euros?
Million euros.
Yes. So they how do they get the materials for drugs? Are they gonna go, do buy all the stuff again? Well, no, you see. They go to the museum that Arturo has worked with in the past, and they steal a bunch of Napoleonic guns and bayonets from Napoleon's Italian campaign, and they use that to rob a pharmacy, which is probably the funniest scene in the film, which is saying something because pretty much every scene I think got a laugh out of us.
And this is the scene from the flash forward, which looked incredibly serious, like a serious gangster scene. But now we've come full circle, and it's just a shit show.
Yeah,
These people aren't even wearing their balaclavas, right? They're wearing their balaclavas with their hooked underneath with the middle section revealing their eyes, hooked underneath their noses.
yeah, and their icing on top is the fact that they're trying to rob a pharmacy with Napoleonic era firearms. Anyways, the pharmacist they're holding out turns out to be one of Pietro's former students who briefly showed up earlier in the film, which again is another good example of it setting up jokes. And so he recognizes Pietro because of the poor way his balaclava is arranged and his voice. And so Mattia, in a panic, shoots him. And then he's, trying to defend his actions. He's like, he's acting. I just grazed him. Pharmacists are always like that. And
I think it
so,
was Andrea who was outside on watch, or it was one of the Latin scholars came in there without their masks there, and they're shouting at them, "You idiot! There's cameras!"
yeah.
Like
This
it's a
whole
complete
scene
shit
is
show. The
just a
pharmacy.
complete mess, and it's hilarious. We won't talk too much about the details for it. You can go see it yourself. But anyways, they have this idea to, they take him in their van, bandage him up, and give him a drug that messes with his short term memory. And
So they
then,
won't remember who it was that shot him or anything.
so they, they've got they've obviously failed to make the drug. So what they do is they take actually, the trick for how they manage to get themselves out of this mess. I won't spoil that. But anyways, they go to the wedding between Bartolomeo and his gypsy girlfriend, which was he was coerced into earlier in order to get the money for the startup. And they
Yeah,
do the
basically the entire crew shotgun married him to his gypsy girlfriend
yes, so they
to
do the deal
just
there because well, the gypsies are also scary gangsters, so Marina's not going to try anything there, right? And they do the deal there, and there's the sit down between Pietro and Marina, and Marina's a lot friendlier this time around, and he talks about how he really admires the gang's work and what they're doing, but he had to put up a tough face before for the people he
leadership.
works with, for leadership reasons. And you know the way Pietro and his gang are nowadays reminds Morena of what he was like when he was just getting started out. But he had to act tough around quote these Neanderthals that he works with. And then Pietro's a bit confused by this, and then Morena reveals how he asks him, "How do you think I got the nickname Morena?" And Julia, who's tied up there, uh, reveals that he's from a family of naval engineers, and so
And
Morena
Marina
is from the
was a famous train.
World War II Triton class submarine, and that Morena's grandfather designed the keel, and Morena himself specializes in fluid dynamics, which is an insanely complicated branch of physics. But he got kicked out of
Basically,
university as well.
they're the guys who work on engines on submarines.
A lot of things on submarines, but yes, we find out the big bad drug dealer, the all scary crime lord, is also a failed academic, which is hilarious. Anyways,
Worse than that, he's a field engineer.
yes, he is. But the point is the consistent theme throughout the film is these brilliant geniuses, top of their field, paid a ton for their education, and then they get screwed over when they get out into the real world. Anyways,
So it's good.
after the deal, Pietro turns himself in for a plea bargain and helps the police catch Morena, and they frame him for shooting the pharmacist. And because Alberto was already in captivity by the police, so they were going to get found out anyways. So Pietro makes this deal, and he ends up in prison teaching part time and ends up getting paid better in prison with his part time teaching job there than he would be on the outside. So he has a visitation hour with his girlfriend and now their kid, and she's talking about how their lawyer friend, canon lawyer friend, who is uh having to do actual like they have to get law advice from him,
Yeah,
and he said that there's a good chance Pietro gets out on parole. And since he gets paid better in the prison than outside, he arranges it so that there's a canteen riot with the Albanians so he can stay in for longer. And that's just the final punchline of the film. And it really encapsulates the whole thing. It's better, he
yeah,
gets paid better in prison and has better living conditions than he does on the outside.
yeah. He does, and it's a horrendous situation, and I imagine a lot of people listening right now can sympathize a lot because it sounds exactly like what a lot of young Zoomers are going through right now, but it's also what a lot of us millennials went through for basically the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And
And
I can
yeah, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And I can personally attest that from my own experience, but I'd rather not dox myself.
Yes. But anyways, with regards to the film overall, it is a very, very funny film. Like we said, we were laughing pretty much every scene in there. There's a lot of good jokes. They don't overstay their welcome. It's well paced, keeps you, constantly in the action. And it's a night it's a comedy and all that, and we talked about that. But at the same time, it's a very brilliant social commentary, and the way that it manages to blend the two is just great. It's a masterpiece in that because there's a lot of people who are like, especially nowadays, try to just push aside commentary by saying, "Oh, it's just a parody or whatever." Whereas here, it's very clearly intentional, and it is the point. In a sense, you
It's
can say
very biting, yeah.
it's a dark comedy, not like in the gruesome sense, but in the sense that the subject matter is kind of depressing, but they're having a laugh at it, which again is a pretty Italian way to look at things.
And to speak about the cinematography itself, it does take a lot of inspiration, not just in concept, but also in direction from Breaking Bad, with excellent use of different colored filters throughout different types of day throughout the films, like green filters to alter the lights, the color of the lights of cars during the bike scene, which trying to catch up with Maurizio was very catching. But also generally good use of light and shadow and color throughout the entire film, especially when the characters are high, because you notice the color gets sharper when Alberto finally takes the drugs.
Yeah,
It's just very excellent done there. To compare and contrast with Breaking Bad, which was at times funny, I have watched the entire series itself. Took itself way too seriously for what it was, unlike this film here. And it's this. If you don't know, if you haven't watched Breaking Bad, long story short, basically a chemistry teacher gets cancer, can't afford health care, gets into selling crystal meth in order to afford his healthcare treatments, and basically his life spirals from there for him and his entire family, and everyone else who gets involved with him, which is basically what happens here in this film. But everyone involved knew what they're getting into, and things just went pear shaped.
yeah.
But
So
what I was going to get into, after we got to the summary there, was the economic situation post 2008 in Italy, which is the situation these gentlemen find themselves in. Not to say that it was great for to be these kinds of academics before the economic crisis that basically stopped the world, but in the wake of there and the wake of Italy joining the EU, uh, Italy became one of the pigs nations. The pigs nations were Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, and Spain, who were the nations post 2008 who had the most debt in Europe because their economies just completely collapsed. Especially in Ireland case, it was the housing market, a doy. But in Italy, it was basically everything all at once, everywhere. So all these gentlemen are living in the post 2008 Italian economic crisis, and it's still they've definitely not recovered at all. All the students that they deal with are Zoomers who are still getting by under student loans, keeping them afloat. So they don't know the real suffering that their teachers are dealing with because they're all older millennials and who are struggling to get by. So it's basically a commentary on a very real, very lived experience that every Italian
yeah,
watching the film went through themselves during the
and
period. And if
I
they
would
they
say
didn't,
it's also definitely an experience that anyone who graduated from university, after 2020 up till now can probably sympathize with a lot as well.
yeah. So if you're a young Zoomer just graduated in 2020 or any time during the COVID years, this movie is as relevant now as it ever was, even intergenerationally, which is crazy to say.
Yeah, because things never really did, quite get better after 2008, not for long anyways. But
It
yes.
never got better. Speaking from my perspective in Ireland, it never got better. It never did.
But yeah,
Uh,
the
yeah.
film, obviously, it is a comedy, so it isn't thinking too hard about what's the solution. It's kind of just raising what the problem is. The fact that it would literally be better for these geniuses to go into stuff like drug peddling than it would be for them to try and pursue a legitimate career, whether it be some uh not great line of work, some dead end job, or something in their own field, because even that will probably pay worse.
And there's a brief commentary in the film about credentialism. Well, it's most obvious with who was it, Arturo?
Yeah.
At that scene there with at
Well,
the rec yard trying to
I
get a new
think
job. But
another very obvious credentialism scene is near the very beginning when Professor Seta admits that him and no one on the finance commission understood anything about Pietro's research, and that's why they decided to not give him the funding. Because
Which is crazy because you're
yeah,
meant to be the guys who decide who gets the scientific funding, and you don't know anything with science.
yeah. Oh yes, go
But the
about the
credentials,
thing with Andrea. Yes,
yeah, Andre, there, credentials is a thing where being credentialed in any way is actually more of a hindrance than anything in getting jobs. We talked about this briefly in our last podcast with It's a Wonderful Life, where you didn't need credentialism to, say, go work as an engineer in an oil rig in Canada, which the main character in that film was considering briefly while looking at brochures at a train station. Whereas nowadays, if you have credentials, you must work in that particular field and only that particular field. Otherwise, you end up as a dishwasher at a back alley Chinese restaurant because you have no other options. Because everything is basically a caste system now, with the way everyone has access to university. Everyone get graduates with a degree or in something. Therefore, everyone only hires people with those degrees or requires such a degree for this job. And if you can't get a job in your field, you're basically screwed to the lowest dregs of society, no matter how capable you are.
yeah. Which isn't the most reassuring thing, but it is, you know, the current reality in a lot of people's lived experience. But before we go on any further, I'm gonna open it up to questions. So if any viewers have any questions or particular comments they want to get out there, we could read those questions off. But yeah, continue,
I mean, I
Gallo,
mean,
while they go ahead and type out any if they have any.
it's oh, I could go on for literally hours about the economic situation in the EU since I've been alive, both in terms of my own country and generally speaking. Basically, Italy used to actually be an economic powerhouse of the EU prior to joining it. But when it joined the EU, all the regulations kind of screwed Italy over in terms of maintaining its economic independence. Because if you don't know anything about the EU, and I don't blame you, it's purposely obfuscated. It's basically a pyramid scheme and shell game between France and Germany trying to be top dogs and screwing over literally everyone else in the union. That's the long and short of it, and am not exaggerating in terms of that. There's many things that businesses in European countries can't do that a German company can do for literally no other reason because it's a German company, for example. Uh, so basically joining the EU, depending on what you were or where you were in physically within the European continent itself, basically determined what your economic specialization is. Like in Ireland's case, we basically became the Silicon Valley of Europe because that was the niche we could get into with lowering our corporate tax rates to attract all the tech companies to Ireland, much to the chagrin of basically all the major economies in Europe. Now, it doesn't benefit Ireland at all, but it gives us an economic niche. Whereas some other small countries in Europe basically got screwed over even before 2008 and have been in basically permanent slave state to the European economic situation before that. But without getting too political, it's just hard to simply explain this economic situation Italy was stuck in 2014 without explaining the meta situation all of Europe was in.
Yes, but anyways, the whole economic hardship pretty much everywhere in the developed world is experiencing nowadays. We can debate the causes of that and the solutions, but you know, there is a there's certain large segments of society who aren't even willing to admit there is a problem, and others who aren't even aware there's a problem. Like recently in the past 2 years when I was job hunting, I there was, a fair amount of times where the person I was interviewing with didn't even realize that the job market was in a bad state, and they're just like, "Oh, I didn't know that." Even though you pretty much constantly see headlines about it nowadays, how, what was I think it was Business Insider, anyone, applying for a job now, it's basically the equivalent of throwing your resume into a black hole. It was like a less than 1% chance of hearing back.
I've also have an anecdote about that exact experience myself there. I have a cousin who works in the field I work in, and she was actually shocked to learn how hard it was for me to get my apprenticeship there because back in her day, it was being tossed out like candy, essentially,
Yeah,
where she just got out of college and immediately went into an apprenticeship there and went on to become her profession. Whereas me, I suffered for 10 years to get noticed.
yeah.
It was
But
crazy.
yeah, and it still is crazy. But the point is that the film, helps at the same time as it raises an awareness of how bad things are. It also helps you to just laugh at the absurdity of the situation for what little consolation that is. But yes, if you have anything to add, Gallo, go ahead. But it doesn't seem like there's any questions, so we're going to be wrapping it up unless you have anything.
There's not really much to add other than when you watch this film there, don't feel too bad, especially when it hits things close to home. Learn to laugh at the absurdity there. It's actually not meant to like hurt you as a as just to help you laugh and see the absurdity situation for what it is.
Yes.
We
Ah,
do recommend it.
yes, it's a very funny film, and if you're in that hole of being overeducated and underemployed, it'll probably be a bit soothing, actually, or assuaging a bit to watch the film, and you'll get a good kick out of it. But that's all for today. So we will see you all next week, where our topic is still undecided. So if our viewers have any suggestions, feel free to leave those. But we are looking to get a guest on near the end of the month. So look forward to that. Now, if that is
Yeah,
all, we will see you guys next time on Zeitguys. Goodbye.
it's been a pleasure to have you with us.